All right, guys, we are live. It is Cowboy Metals live. It is Tuesday, election night, November 8th, 2022. And we have an interesting show planned for you guys. We're going to talk about gold going up after midterm elections and why the central banks are buying all this gold. And I'm just going to narrate here until I make sure that we have sound. Give me just a moment, ladies and gentlemen. And we are good with sound. Thank you, everybody, for joining in with the program. Appreciate everybody being here with us today. Everybody let me know if you got sound because I'm not getting it. We have a poll here, which is, do elections affect economic outcomes? Answers are yes, big time, no, they really are all the same, or a little bit, I think. Tell me what you think. And we will go. Thank you, everybody, for joining the program. Neil is here as always. Joseph S. is here. A reminder, guys, if you're interested, we do have YouTube membership. You sign up for that. There are two levels. One is just an appreciation for everything we do here on the show and making a little contribution to help us out. It does help defray the cost of running a channel and running a business, as well as we have a secondary level, which will allow you to see what I do every couple of weeks, which is what we call Unfiltered, where I give you my true thoughts. On purpose, I do not discuss the topics on the regular show that I'll be discussing on that Unfiltered. You're just going to have to come take a look. If you want to do it for a month and just see what's there and cancel your subscription, you can do that. I would always give a refund if you guys aren't happy. But we talk about stuff that probably would get us a little bit in trouble on this channel just because we get a little bit more in speculation and talk about stuff that I won't put on the regular live stream or on the regular channel. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and take a look at it. Also, super chats are open. Another way to help the channel, if you don't want to subscribe, you can super chat, ask me a question. I guarantee that I'll answer it during the live streams. And remember, of course, we have the poll. Peter Frohwein is in the house. Thank you for joining and riding shotgun, Peter, and doing all of our moderation duties. We do appreciate it. I'm going to jump right in, guys, because it's election night. I know there's a lot of coverage coming. Last time we did this during election night, we didn't get a lot of people weren't watching the show because they're watching election. That's why we're doing it early today. We're going to knock this out early and let you guys kind of absorb this over the next couple of days. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Let's jump right into it as I get over to the Zoom screen. And we're going to jump right into the subject of this, which is why central banks are buying gold. So here is a little piece from a World Gold Council study in which they were noted, and the data is originally from Metals Focus, and they're noticing that year-to-date gold demand resumes its pre-pandemic pace on the central banks. So if you look down here, this little red area, I don't know if you can see it, are the central banks. And so this is a central bank gold buying. So they've been net positive buying gold dating back to 2010. That's now 12 straight years. 2022 will be positive as well. Why are the central banks buying gold? We're going to get into that on this live stream and exactly what they're not buying or what they are buying, and why it matters that they're buying it. I also wrote an article on JM Bullion for this, and that's going to come out, I believe, on Thursday, where I talk about this in a little bit more detail in the written form. If those of you who are JM Bullion fans, go to jmbullion.com/blog, where we provide all the blog content for them. So we know, looking at this chart, that the central banks are buying a lot of gold, and they have been for 12 years. Why is that? Because Basel III. I've done tons of videos on Basel III on the channel. Just do a search on my channel for Basel III. I've covered it ad nauseum. I've gone through all the documents multiple times as it relates to gold. I think we've covered everything that's in there. It's a big set of standards and guidelines put out by the BIS that are suggested for the world central banks. Of course, they're following it exactly as they're following because they're good little central bankers, and they do what their BIS overlords tell them to do. Well, in any case, looking at Basel requirements, gold is a high quality liquid asset when hedged in the futures markets, and it's basically equivalent to cash and debt, banking debt held to capitalize the balance sheets of the central banks and the commercial banking system. So gold is very, very important. That's why they've been buying the gold. But there's something that they're not buying, which I think is interesting, which we'll get to further in the episode. Here we've got a chart you guys are familiar with, and that's seeing the central bank gold purchases dating back to 2010. This is the amount of tons that they bought. Now, in quarter 3 of 2022, it spiked up to 400 tons, which is more than they bought, I think, dating back to 1967, back when the U.S. was on a gold gold standard and the currency was backed by gold, that's the last time that the central banks bought so much gold across the world. Of course, now none of the fiat currencies around the world are subject to gold backing or gold requirements that I'm aware of, at least none of the major economies in the world. And even most of the emerging market economies are not pegged to gold. There's no formal gold standard there, but they have been buying gold dating back to 2010 because of the last crisis. And because in 2012, the BIS sought to put out requirements for bank liquidity. In 2014, they put out the first set of Basel III standard or Basel standards. Now we're up to Basel III, talking about Basel IV at this point. And part of that plan is gold. And that's why they've been buying so much. But I found an interesting BIS study that I want to talk to you about today, in which we found this neat little artifact. And before I talk about that, I'm just going to check the stream, make sure everything's okay. Looks like we got sound, guys. Looks like everything's going okay. You guys are voting in the poll, so we're going to go back to the presentation and the share that we have. So as you notice here on this chart, on the left-hand side, I've got circled the advanced economies. So AE on this chart, this orange, is advanced economies, and E and DC are more the emerging market type of economies. So you're thinking US versus like Southeast Asia, for example, or against Africa, US, UK, Europe, all those advanced economies. Their trend is to be in debt. So they're over the 90% debt to GDP standard that Rogoff and Reinhardt wrote about as Harvard researchers, saying that's the point of no return. Once you get 90% of debt to your annual GDP rate, you tend to have high interest rates, high inflation. You tend to have to restructure that debt. What's the US going through right now? High inflation rates, high interest rates, and talking about restructuring debt and having too much debt. So when you get there, that's when gold becomes important. When you have this much debt to GDP, that's where we are. And if you look at who is getting the debt, it's not the central banks. So why am I tying this in? Why am I talking about debt all of a sudden when I talk about central banks buying gold? Because Basel III, remember, it set the standards for bank liquidity, not only for gold, but anything that's considered a high quality liquid asset, and HQLA in their terms, in the banking system. Gold is one of those. Well, what are they not? What are the central banks not buying? Their own damn debt. If you look at this chart here, most of the marginal holders of debt is not the domestic central banks. The domestic central banks are only holding a sliver of all of this debt. Who's buying the debt? Well, in blue, it's the domestic non-banks. Okay, that's this chart. This chart is who's buying and who's not buying. The banks are not buying their own debt. Non-banking institutions domestically are buying them. Domestic central banks aren't buying that much. Foreign banks are buying a fair amount, as you can see here, although not that much. But the foreign non-banks are the biggest entities to come in, especially after 2009. The foreign non-banks and the domestic non-banks. The domestic non-banks and the foreign non-banks are the ones that own the debt. And specifically the domestic non-banks, the non-financial institutions, are the one buying the debt of the sovereigns issuing it. So who's going to be holding the bag when the system crashes? It's going to be the non-central banks, the financial sector outside of banks, and non-financial sector holders are going to be left holding the bag. In other words, the bankers aren't buying their own garbage. The bankers are not buying their own garbage. That's the important part to remember about this chart. The bankers are buying what? They're buying gold. Look at this gold demand by sector. Central banks are buying more gold now than they were before. That's what the red bar indicates. Red bar indicates now, blue bar is before. This is before what they were buying in gold. Now here's after what they're buying in gold. And it's bought by the central banks. It's less for investment, technology, and jewelry. Although jewelry is strong, the central banks are the biggest net change in buying since the last crisis in 2009, 2010. What did they learn? They learned that they better hold gold and not this other garbage, the debt, which they don't hold. They're issuing the debt and sending it to domestic non-banks and other non-financial entities. Okay, these are the hedge funds. These are the financial houses. These are the domestic industries, which are non-bank, or the foreign industries, which are non-bank. They're buying central bank debt thinking it's safe. The local banks aren't buying it and the central banks aren't buying it. They're buying higher quality liquid assets. What are they buying? Gold. The banks are buying fucking gold. Okay. So when you think about the elections tonight and what to hold, it's not this other fucking central bank digital garbage. That garbage, they're not buying their own garbage because they know it's garbage. It's listed in Basel III requirements as high quality liquid asset. Well, why in the hell aren't they buying each other's debt, sovereign debt. They're not buying the sovereign debt of their nation because they know it's garbage. They're buying more gold. That's what they're doing. We watch what they do, not what they say. I don't care what they tell you. Look at what they do. The BIS is ratted on the central bank saying they aren't buying their own garbage. They're not buying the sovereign debt of their country. They're not buying debt, period. They're buying gold because they know what's coming. That's why. Look at the report. It's telling you what they're buying. On election night, the central banks are buying gold. The rich are buying gold. The bullion banks are repositioning long in gold. They've already done it. Silver, they're on their way to gold. Give it a couple more months, they'll be there. They're in gold because they know, despite what happens in the midterms, in this kabuki theater, this garbage that you watch on television, this designed to feed you hope that the politicians are going to figure it out. When you know the system is beyond 90% debt to GDP, and you know the best researchers in Harvard told you that's the point of no return, and you cannot go back. What are the central banks buying? They're buying gold. They're not buying garbage debt. They're not buying that fucking crap. They're buying gold. Why am I so expressive here about this? Is because to get you to understand what the money interests understand. What they understand is you go gold. What happens during elections? Gold goes up. Let's talk about that for just a minute. Let's talk about the Wall Street Journal story, in which talks about gold typically goes up against midterms. Here you go, Wall Street Journal. Gold typically goes up again after midterms, World Gold Council says. 62% of the time, it has a return of 2%. So if you want an easy trade, you should have gotten into gold prior to today. Gold is up today. It's wonderful. Gold and silver are up. This is short term. It's up on anticipation of the futures being up to the election. It doesn't matter who gets elected. Almost 2/3 of the time, you're going to see a pop in gold. That's the traders getting in early, front running that trade. I fully expect gold and silver to sell back off sometime after the election, because the election itself is not going to change anything. Why? Because look at what the central banks are doing. They're buying gold. They know the elections don't change things. They know we're past the 90% debt to GDP point of no return. They know there's nothing that they can do. They know that's why they're buying the gold, and gold will go up, and the story will be the midterm elections and gold and blah, blah, blah. No, the bigger issue, and that's important, and I covered it. The bigger issue is the fact that central banks have been buying gold, and last quarter, they know the crap that's coming down the pipe, and they're buying it like they haven't bought it since the dollar was backed by gold as a world reserve currency. They're buying it like they haven't bought it in almost 60 years. Why? They're not going to tell you this when you watch the election crap tonight. They're not going to tell you this. They're not going to tell you the truth. They're not going to tell you that the central banks won't touch sovereign debt with a 10-foot fucking pole, because they know it's past the point of no return. They're buying gold, and they're buying gold faster than they possibly can. And that's why it's being drained out of COMEX. That's why. Watch what they do. Don't listen to what they say. Watch what they do. Do not listen to what those assholes say, that the central banks are the politicians. I'm being real here for a minute. This is almost an unfiltered episode. I'm getting really close to what I would say an unfiltered, because it's something that you need to understand. The central banks are buying because they know, and it's in Basel III, and they're buying it. It's in the market. We know that they're buying it. We know that the central banks hold more gold than any other single entity, collective entity around the world. Okay, yes, there may be some other organizations which have owned it over time. We've hinted at that. Religious organizations, other political organizations, other sovereigns may hold it. But the central banks and the sovereign wealth funds of major countries hold more gold than anybody else. Why? Because they get it. They understand. Okay, the politicians get it. They're not going to tell you during the election cycle, but they get it. The politicians get it, and the central banks get it. And all the debt and the garbage that they're issuing is getting bought up by pensions and hedge funds and family office funds, because they don't know, because they're not told the truth. But you come to this channel because we'll tell you the truth. We'll tell you the fucking truth. That's what this is. This is Cowboy Metals Live. We broadcast from the great state of Texas, and we tell the truth. We're not liars like the politicians. So just remember this: no matter who gets elected, no matter which way this swings, vote for gold, because gold stands the test of time. Gold has been here for thousands of years. Gold will be here when humans are extinct off of this planet. Gold will still be here. Gold is the answer. It's not the elections. I'll be honest with you. Financially, it's gold. So no matter who you voted for, vote gold and understand the power of gold, and understand the biggest power players in the world in finance are buying gold, and they're issuing debt to everybody else. They're buying gold and they're issuing debt to everybody else. It's in the chart. It's undeniable. The BIS admits this in their report. In fact, I'm going to put it back up on screen just so we can talk about it one more time. just so I get to scream about it one more time. What does this chart say? They're not buying their own garbage. In corporate America, we used to have a saying, you eat your own dog food. You buy your own product. If you don't buy your product, nobody will buy it because nobody will believe it has value. It's called eat your own dog food. The central banks aren't eating the dog food garbage that their sovereigns are putting out. They're not eating their debt. Okay, they're not taking the debt. It's this little yellow. They don't own most of this garbage. Okay, it's other people that are buying that garbage. It's not the central banks anymore. That has changed. And that's in the BIS report. Central banks are buying gold. Okay, they're not buying the garbage the governments are putting out because they know. And despite what the idiot politicians will tell you, I know that a lot of the politicians on both sides of the aisle mean well, but you're past the point of no return. It's all kabuki theater. It doesn't matter who you vote for. Well, it kind of does. It matters some who you vote for. But with the way that the financial system is going, we're going to have to crash no matter what. Do we want to have the right politicians in office when it happens? Sure. Go vote. I'm not going to discourage you voting. But just understand where we are. We're past the point of no return. They're lying to you. The politicians lie to you. The central banks lie to you. Buy gold, vote gold. That's the answer today. Vote gold no matter what happens in the elections. All right, getting back to the poll, do elections affect economic outcomes? 51% of you say yes, big time. 32% say no, really all the politicians are the same. And 17% a little. I think those are really good answers. Thank you, everybody, for voting in the poll. I do appreciate it. That's all the data I got. So I'm just going to look and see if we have questions. I do not see any super chats, guys. None to answer there. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the people that we have on the channel that really help support us. Kinesis is the first one. If you guys have never used Kinesis, it's a way for you to store your gold and silver safely, use a debit card in many areas of the world to access it, and also be able to trade on the platform. You also get holder and mentor and other sorts of benefits for just holding and minting and using it, which is a financial incentive to be in the system, but it's a good way to hold your gold and silver privately. So if you guys are interested, go to kinesis.money. We have a referral link down there. If you actually want to use our code to refer, we get a little bit of something for the website, and every little bit helps. So if you're interested, go to kinesis.money. Of course, we have other people down that you can access gold and silver as well. Down in the description, we have a link for Jan Bullion if you're interested in that service. And of course, we fully recommend our friend Ian Everard of 𝙁𝙍𝙊𝙎. He has the lowest prices on silver and gold that we found, and he only shops and buys the gold and silver, which makes sense. He doesn't stock every type of issuance because that would drive up his costs. This way, he can simply sell you what is the best deal. 𝙁𝙍𝙊𝙎 on our website, goldsilverpros.com. And enough there for the commercials. Returning back to the thesis is that yes, central banks are buying more gold than they bought since 1967 collectively. They've been buying gold since 2010. We seem to be at an inflection point for, let me put this back up on the screen. I cannot show this enough times. The inflection point for the inflection point seems to have occurred because look at the increased demand this year over what it was previously. It's insane. Yeah, there's a lot of jewelry demand. There's technology demand, investment demand. Look at the central banks. Who's demanding more gold now than anybody? Central banks. Are they going to tell you? No. Why? Because we're past 90% GDP across the world in all advanced economies. And the emerging markets are starting to creep up there. Even the emerging markets are taking on debt. What a disaster that's going to be when it all collapses. Here's central bank gold purchases for Q3 of this year compared to every other quarter going back to the crisis. Dwarfs it, doubles it almost any other quarter. Doubles it. And the most that they bought collectively since 1967, when fiat currencies were still pegged to gold on a gold standard type of system, which did not release for the world's reserve currency, the US dollar, until 1971. So why now, if the dollar is so stable, if the bonds are so stable, if the system is so stable, are the central banks buying more gold now than since the day in which the US dollar became the world standard in US fiat currencies? Why, for the last 10 years, according to the World Gold Council, the metals focus, are the central banks buying more gold than ever? Listen to what they do, not what they say. That's the lesson to be learned from all of this. I'll go ahead and end the poll, guys. I think that's going to do it. Reminder, tonight's going to be a little bit short because we have election night. I want to watch that. It's the screaming meter, the kabuki theater, I call it, is so much fun to watch. Yes, it does matter. I'm not being completely disingenuous and dismissive. with the elections. I know elections matter, but given the two-party system and all the promises have been broken, given the problems we have in the financial system, they're not going to stop the Great Reset. They're not going to tell you the truth about the Great Reset. You have to come here for that. And we're going to tell you what's actually going on. The central banks are buying gold because they know what's going to happen. And that article I showed you in the Wall Street Journal, 62% of the time after midterm elections, gold goes up. Why? Because everybody knows that you have a change in the posturing of midterms are usually a referendum on the previous election and a preview of what can happen in the next election. And so the midterms tend to be counter to the four-year election, the four-year presidential cycle, for example. So we expect probably more Republicans to get voted in. And so they may actually get a lead in two of the houses potentially. Is that going to change the spending? No, because the Republicans and Democrats both spend all of your money. They spend your children's money. They put you into debt slavery. This is what they do. This is why you buy gold and silver. Okay, so yes, 62% of the time gold rises because I think everybody realizes no matter what party you have in office, they're all full of garbage at the end of the day. And they also know this time around, the central banks know this is going to be the end of this current system. Thank you, SoCal Silver, for the contribution and the keep it up. I appreciate that very much. If you have a question, put it in there. I'll be sure to answer it. I appreciate everybody that contributes to the program. We're just about going to wrap this up because election stuff is coming up soon. The title of this was Central Banks Just Broke a Record Buying Gold. This is November 8, 2022, about 5 p.m. Central. We're talking about the fact that central banks have bought more gold this quarter than they have since 1967. We talked about the fact that they're not buying the garbage that the country's put out. That's going to non-banks and other non-financial institutions. In other words, what is happening is the banks are aligning more to high-quality liquid assets out of Basel III, and they're taking their garbage and they're moving it off book to you and me and our organizations and other non-banking agencies. That's what's happening right now. So think about that as the election is going on tonight. As you're sitting here casting your vote for someone to get into office, to set new policies, to spend more of your money, look at what the financial elites are doing. They're fixing their bank balance sheets, moving the garbage off to everybody else, and they're going to hold the highest quality liquid assets. They even know what they are. They even have a name, and it's in their regulations. It's in their standards and procedures, in their guidelines. Everything that they're doing now is to move to more high quality liquid assets and to shunt off, S-H-U-N-T, shunt off the stuff that they don't want to you and to organizations that are holding your retirement and organizations that will be bankrupt that you may need when the time comes. Thank you, Gordon Nash, for the contribution, $10. I appreciate that so much. It does help the program. And if you have a question, please throw that in there. That's what's happening. That's a story of what's happening. And you better damn well believe on this week's Unfiltered, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to get even more expressive I did on this program. And we'll talk about other things as well. And we'll so sign up for that. Again, we can't talk about what we talk about on Unfiltered because it's more a private conversation with a lot more speculation on things that go out, a little bit more future looking certain things. And it's really just a private club for us. And, you know, when you have a fight club, you don't talk about fight club. So I'm just going to tell you it's there, but we're not going to talk about what's in it. You have to come see it. But just know that it is research-based, but we do talk a little bit more futuristically about what we think could happen. And I think I provide some depth and some conversation there that will accentuate what's on the free program. All right, I'm going to wrap it up, guys. Thank you so much, everybody that has joined the membership or done the super chats. Even if you didn't and you just come here to support the channel, I greatly appreciate it. We've got 260 people in right now, which is wonderful on election night. Thank you guys so much for stopping by the channel early. Remember to vote gold. No matter what happens tonight, gold, gold, gold stands the test of time. It'll be here long after we're dead and gone. And the politicians, no matter what they try to do, cannot suppress it forever. The time is coming for gold. Your signs are the COT report. Look at the positioning of traders I talk about every week, Sunday nights, Sunday afternoon, Sunday nights as the market opens. I do that report. Positioning long, the sharps, the bullion banks. Remember that. Watch that video every week, guys, for signs of where that market is going. That's going to be your first sign of where this market is going to go. I'm going to break it on that Sunday evening before we ever touch it on the live stream. So go watch that report. And remember to tune in the live streams for the latest on what's going on in gold and silver. And remember also the central banks are buying. The central banks are buying. The central banks are buying. The bullion banks have gone net long silver and are working their way net long gold in the derivative markets where spot is determined. That's where the price is going to move when they finally get long or really close to it. And the physical trade is the central banks. The manufacturer, everybody else is grabbing as much gold and silver as they can. It was silver first, dating back to February of last year, silver squeeze, right? And now gold, you're starting to see that gold come off. We've seen it on the COMEX reports. You've seen the central bank buying. You're starting to see it. They're going after the metal. Okay, that's what's happening. Pay attention what's happening behind the scenes. I'm going to talk about it here. The political theater now is kabuki theater. We know financially where we're going. You know they can't solve it. So pay attention to what's going on in finance. And even though you're doing your best to elect the best people to run this country, just understand they can't stop the financial collapse that's coming. I don't care what they do. They can't. We're past the point of no return. We know. All right, that's it, guys. Enjoy the election. I hope whoever you voted for wins. And if they don't, you know, we better all hope that all the people that get elected do the best job possible, regardless of what party affiliation they have, so that we can prosper as a nation and enjoy our freedoms. Thank you so much. Until next time, this is Rob Kientz with Gold Silver Pros.